Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the SkolCast. Tonight's episode, season 1, episode number 7. It's June 6, 2019, 9 o'clock p.m. Central Time, and thanks for joining us. So I'm Chris Wilkie, along with my co-host, Mr. Jeremy Carter here. How you doing tonight, Jeremy?
Fantastic. It's good to be on again.
Good. Just want to invite you guys, as always, definitely follow us on Twitter at VikingsBeat, also Facebook.com/VikingsBeat. Definitely smash that reaction button tonight for tonight's show. Definitely leave your comments, and we really look forward to tonight's show. We got a couple small little housekeeping items with the Vikings that's maybe happened in the last week or so, Jeremy. So we had the chief operating officer of the Vikings, Kevin Warren. He had an excellent opportunity that he took that was announced, I believe, just yesterday. He is going to be leaving the team, and he's going to be taking over as commissioner of the Big Ten. So really, that's going to be a big void for the Vikings to fill. Kevin Warren, what an outstanding, not only obviously COO of the Vikings. He's done an excellent job with working through all the facilities and just running the Vikings and things like that, but also in the community as well. So that's going to be tough shoes to fill for the Vikings, isn't it?
Yeah, a loss for the Vikings, but certainly a huge gain for the Big Ten. So, he was definitely instrumental in a lot of the U.S. Bank Stadium and some of their practice facilities. Very well respected in the industry, very well respected within the Big Ten as well. And so sad to see him go, but he'll do a fantastic job for the Big Ten, and we'll look forward to seeing kind of what he does and some of the things that he wants to achieve as the Big Ten commissioner, prominently really focusing on the student athletes. It's kind of really, I think, one of his initial initiatives that he's talked about. So we wish him the best of luck, and certainly we'll have to fill that void here at some juncture. I'm sure the Minnesota Vikings will look to do that here fairly quickly. So.
No, absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on that throughout the summer here in the coming months and see which direction the Vikings go with that hire. But just as important as the players on the field, the people in the front office serve that huge role, and that'll be an important hire for them as well. So, but our main objective and our main focus tonight, Jeremy, we've got a special guest on the line, and we've been looking forward to this one for quite some time now, since we've been having the conversations and working through the scheduling and all that. We have with us tonight one of the most heard sports event public address announcers in the world. So a lot of us that go to the Vikings games as either season ticket owners or as just fans that have been to the stadium to a Vikings game are going to recognize this voice. But also, if you tune into the Super Bowl and you listen on that as well, we are happy to have on with us tonight the voice of the Vikings as far as the public address announcer, Mr. Alan Roach. Alan, how you doing tonight?
Hey guys, doing great.
Good. No, thanks for joining us, and we're super excited. So, you came to the Vikings. What have you been? Are you coming up here this fall? Will be is this your third season?
Year?
Third season coming up, Alan?
Nope, season 4.
Season 4, okay.
Season 4. So you actually are kind of your roots run deep here to Minnesota. You went to high school here and kind of grew up in Minnesota. Is that correct?
Yep, I was born in Slayton, which is the county seat of Murray County, the only county in Minnesota which makes 0% of its dollars from industry.
It's all residential, huh?
Yeah, it's all agricultural.
Agricultural.
Just strictly an agricultural county down by Worthington, Pipestone, Marshall. Slayton's, 2,500 people. I was there till 9th grade, and then I moved to Nisswa, which is on Gull Lake, just north of Brainerd. And so I went and finished high school in Brainerd and graduated from Brainerd High School.
Oh, that's awesome. So we're familiar with Nisswa as well. We visit the chain of lakes up there every year, go up to a cabin up there. So Nisswa is a great place as well.
Grandview Lodge I worked at for many years, and both my mom and dad worked there for a lot of years as well as we lived on the lake.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's a neat place up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, love Grandview Lodge. Shout out. GBL.
Exactly.
I worked in the boathouse for, I don't know, 4 summers from the end of high school, right after high school. And I worked in the boathouse. I took people water skiing, and I, took care of the beach. Rubbed suntan lotion on
Hey,
ladies if they needed to be.
could you ask for a better summer job than that as a kid at that age?
No, that was a dream come true, much like the Vikings. I mean, I lucked into a lot of really cool gigs like that. My dad used to say, "You'll never work a day in your life," and thankfully he was right.
That's awesome. So, so you began a radio career in high school up in Brainerd, it sounds like, and then from there, tell us a little bit about your time in Brainerd, that kind of getting kicked off with your radio career, and kind of when you've kind of figured out that you were gifted with voice and speaking, things like that.
Well, I did start. I forget if it was before my junior year or sophomore year. I always waffle back and forth, and then have to go back and look, and I forget all the time. Anyway, it was either the summer before my junior year or the summer before my sophomore year that I started at KLIZ, which is now the Power Loon in
Sure.
Nisswa, Brainerd.
Brainerd, right?
But at that time there was KLIZ AM and KLIZ FM, and it was towards the end of, again, either my sophomore year or junior year, and I had a class called Student Council where Guy Dowd was the teacher. Guy Dowd, still a good friend of mine. He was actually named Teacher of the Year in the United States about 3 years after I graduated. Got an award from the president. Anyway, he taught this class, and we, as a class, had to go to this radio station in Brainerd, which was in a big old house, and record 20 seconds or 30 seconds of a John F. Kennedy speech. I don't know if it was for Memorial Day or something around that time. And so the whole class went to the radio station, and one by one went in and out of the radio studio, and I went in and did my 30 seconds. And when I came out, the manager of the radio station was standing there and just said, "Hey, do you like doing that? You sounded good. Would you like a job?" And so I started running Twins games on the weekends at KLIZ AM. And all that was Herb Carneal and help me.
He's a legend. What a legend he was for those Twins games.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm trying to remember.
The other guy too, yeah.
John Gordon.
The other guy, Herb Carneal, and
there was John.
Anyway,
he was with John Gordon. That's who I remember when I was growing
John
up.
Gordon was part of this. Was before John Gordon.
Okay.
Oh.
Man, Matt, I can't remember it. But anyway, I would just sit in the radio studio and do those Twins games, and so in between innings, I'd have to bring down the network and turn up our local commercials, and then for the game, put the network back on. Just slide buttons on a machine up and down, and that was my job for that summer. And that's how it started. Then after I continued working there throughout high school, and then went to college in Marshall, Southwest State. And after doing 1 year at Marshall, KLIZ asked if I would be the sports director and do sports in the morning on the morning show. And I think I did play-by-play of Brainerd High School basketball and football. And I got sent to Minnesota Twins spring training in, they won in '87, so it was spring of 1986. I got to go to Kissimmee, Florida. I was 21 years old. Maybe I was only 20 years old, and I was interviewing Kirby Puckett and Kent Herbeck and Gary Gaetti a year before they won the World Series. Again, awesome gig. Don't know how I fell into it,
Right?
But there it was. Incredible memories.
No, that would be.
So as you kind of went from there and then into a lot of the, it looked like you went into some of FM radio stations and kind of did that for a while, and then kind of
well, after I was at KLIZ for like a year,
okay.
And then they were like, wow, this is really cool having you as a sports director. It's awesome and all that, but we don't make anywhere near enough money to have a sports director. So sorry, your job's not here anymore. And so then I wanted to do music radio, and so in the following 9 years, well, I guess probably the following 7 years, I worked at 8 radio stations in 4 states and just kept bouncing around. And in 1991, I landed in Denver, and I've been in Denver ever since.
So how does someone like that transition from radio into doing the PA for a professional sports team? Is there an audition process? Do people come to you and say, hey, we really like how you sound and how you run things on the radio, and we'd like to have you try doing the play-by-play for us? Or how does that process typically work? Or is it just kind of some of it's luck, some of it's who you meet and audition? And
well, yeah, it all depends upon kind of the situation too. I mean, if somebody's had a PA announcer for a long time, when the first major league sport that I announced was the Rockies, and I announced their very first game in their history. So they didn't have anybody or anything to draw on of how you go about hiring a PA announcer. So that was a good story. The best story is how I started doing PA announcing of any kind, and it was summer of 1990, and I was in Colorado Springs, which is just an hour south of Denver. And I went on a happy hour on a Friday with a salesperson from the radio station right after I got off the air. We went and drove to our favorite watering hole and sat there for an hour and a half, and then I'm sure we Ubered over to the
For sure.
to the Sky Sox game. And at that time, the Sky Sox, Colorado Springs Sky Sox, or AAA team for the Cleveland Indians. Mm. And I went there with the sales guy from the radio station who was friends with the assistant general manager. And so, after a couple innings, we went up and we met the assistant GM in the press box, and it's just a little tiny press box, barely bigger than, like a high school press box. And we were just standing there, and as we talked for 5 minutes, the guy over in the corner, the PA guy, was announcing the batters, and I just said at one point, hey, that looks really cool and a fun job. If that guy ever needs a vacation or you ever need a fill-in or something, I'd love to do that. And Dwight, I remember, was the assistant GM's name. He goes, well, have you ever done that before? I go, no. So, well, actually, in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, whatever, he's going to be gone for a weekend, and we are looking for somebody. Are you serious? You want to do it? Yep, I'll call you. Okay, so we called it. I did it. Did Friday, Saturday, Sunday games, and after the Sunday game, Dwight came to me and said, yeah, we would like you to do all of our games. I said, okay. And that's how it started.
That's kind of how
that's interesting. Yeah.
That is some of those things.
That is exactly. I mean, I don't know how I would have gotten into this line of work had that conversation not taken place that night.
So when you did that first game where you filled in, was it tougher than what you thought it was going to be? Did you have a kind of a predetermined notion of going in, hey, this is what I think?
No, because I had so many years experience in live radio,
okay.
And that was, radio is before computers too. Although probably the scariest thing I remember about doing it was there was a lot of computer stuff. The Sky Sox were fairly high tech for a AAA baseball team in 19. What year would that have been? 90. They had a computer screen that I used a mouse, and they had sound buttons on there. And so, like on foul balls, they would, play the sound of a windshield crashing or a duck quacking or, whatever goofy AAA baseball stuff they do back then. And I was in charge of not only announcing the batters, but also playing these sounds and sound effects and music clips and whatever they had. So it was a lot like running a radio show. I'm sure that, I was in a learning process for a couple of games, but after that I made it my own, and it was awesome, and I loved it. The second year, so in 91, it was right around the 4th of July, and I remember we were at a Sky Sox game in the afternoon, and it came over the wire that Major League Baseball announced the expansion cities, and it was Florida and Colorado. And Mike Kliss was a reporter in Colorado Springs at that time. He's kind of grown along with me. He's now the main reporter, best reporter, best beat reporter for the Denver Broncos. But anyway, Mike was sitting next to me, and I remember telling him that day, I have no idea how to do it or anything, how to find out about it, but I will get that job for the Rockies. And I just worked at it over the course of the next, 3 years. And it wasn't until, less than 48 hours before the first pitch ever for the Colorado Rockies that I got a call that said, hey, would you like to announce our game in a day and a half?
Wow.
Not much preparation time, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had applied and sent them all kinds of things, and, they had contacted me back barely. Yeah, thanks for sending it. Okay, we'll let you know.
Right.
And it wasn't until actually after the Rockies had played 2 games, their first 2 games in their franchise history were on the road in New York against the Mets. Played on a Monday and a Wednesday. They had a Wednesday afternoon game. And it was after the Wednesday afternoon game that I got a call from Kevin Carlin of the Rockies. And he said, hey, we'd like to ask you to be the PA announcer. Awesome. Well, our first game is Friday at 2.
Wow.
That's how that came about.
So you ended up with the Rockies. So you were, fast forward just a little bit, you were with Colorado Rockies did that gig for probably about 13 years is what I understand, Alan. That's right, isn't
14
it?
seasons.
14 seasons. Okay.
Yep.
And then kind of simultaneously with that, I know a little bit later, so kind of at the start of the new millennium, that's when you would have started as the public address announcer with the Denver Broncos. Is that right?
The Broncos and the Avalanche, I kind of started right around the same time, and it was, like late 99.
Okay.
And that kind of had to do a bit with, I was working at a 103.5 The Fox in Denver, a classic rock radio station, and I'd been there since coming to Denver in 1991, and through the Rockies. At the same time, I was doing full-time radio as the afternoon drive host. And in 2000, I left that position and went to KOA radio. KOA would be like the WCCO of Denver. And KOA has the Broncos and the Buffaloes and CU Buffs and the Rockies and whatever else, the Broncos, or whatever ones I forgot to mention. And so as I was a sports guy again, I was doing sports in the morning. And so kind of along with that then, I guess partly by coincidence, partly because I was around them all the time, I got the jobs with the Avalanche and the Broncos right about the same time.
Yeah, great. And so we were talking right before we came on the air. So one of Jeremy and I's fun memories of you is we attended the Vikings-Broncos game in the season of 2016. We went out there with that 2016. Yep. That's how we figured, right? So, which would have been your last season there. And first of all, that's an unbelievable atmosphere. Mile High is just absolutely unbelievable for a football game. We absolutely loved it. And
yeah, that was a good day too. It was a good game all the way through, and I remember that game well.
Yeah, good weather.
It was great weather, and so we actually walked out of that stadium that day, and just some of the calls that you made, we just they just resonated with us. Like, we would say, you'd always say like incomplete. It was awesome. I loved how you just called the game and things like that. And it's just one of those things where, I think and we'll get to the Vikings here in just a minute, but some of the things I think you've carried through even to the Vikings, like some of the same things as far as, I know you've obviously made it your own and things, but, I love how with the Vikings, you have your call, like when it's a first down, that's a Minnesota Viking, and you get everybody involved and do the whole first down thing and let the fans kind of get involved. I love those things that you do. Do do you come up with those things on your own, or have they just kind of happen with time, or how do you come up with those calls?
Well, I steal them like every good artist does. Actually, the Broncos, I started doing PA stuff with the Broncos in 2000. And at that time, I was the sideline reporter for the radio station also, so I was down on the field. So I did all the pregame stuff. I did the player introductions. But the longtime PA announcer all the way up till 2006 who called the game, his name was Alan Cass. And Alan Cass just passed away about 2 years ago. I became friends with Alan after kind of sharing the PA duties for a couple of years and then trying to fill his shoes. The incomplete thing was his, and it wasn't even really his. It belongs to the fans because they're the ones that did it. Alan Cass was much more, much closer to the Bob Shepard kind of PA announcer than I am. The classical, very low-key, great voice, great delivery kind of PA announcer. And Alan Cass used to just say in his own, in his own fashion on an incomplete pass, Johnson's pass intended for Tucker is incomplete. And there was, not any emphasis on it. It was just the way he delivered it. And over the years, fans just started picking up on it. And I don't know, it was probably in the mid-'90s, I suppose, when fans just on their own took it to say incomplete. So much so that, Alan didn't even need to say it anymore. And so by the time I got the job, I didn't have to say it. All I had to do was say, Phillip Rivers' pass intended for Smith is, that's all I'd have to do.
And the fans would fill in the rest, huh?
Take it over.
Incomplete. And it's a tremendous home field advantage kind of fun thing for the fans to do, and it's unique to the game of football, and kind of to some degree it's one of those unique things in sports that different places have. Boston has Fenway Park has the Green Monster, and the Broncos have incomplete. It's part of who they are.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's interesting. Yeah, I always marvel at. I mean, obviously you have the voice that's very recognizable, but the delivery, I think you stand out from some of the other people that we've listened to, where it's noticeable, but the way you deliver, players' names coming onto the field, players' names coming onto the ice, you always find some of those nuances with some of the different people, like a Joel Sackett, or how you say some of the things. Mm-hmm. You remember those,
If I had to pick out whatever my specialty or whatever my strength is, obviously it's my voice and just the way it comes out. I don't do anything to make it that way. I'm blessed that I have it, and I love the fact that I get to use it every day to do what I love to do. And that's the thing that I've kind of hung my hat on, is sounding exciting but not over the top so, and being able to use my voice to say names a cool way. That's what I've made my living on.
Well, you certainly make the fans excited at the opening of the games, the stadium, so it just gets people going.
For sure.
And it's, I love doing the Vikings games. Obviously, it's the most incredible job I've ever had. Super Bowls, gold medal hockey games in the Olympics, the list goes on, and it's great. But the Vikings are by far the coolest thing I've ever done. I was more nervous before my first ever preseason game with the Vikings 4 years ago
really,
than I was before any Super Bowl.
Just because you're it's a hometown state for you? Is that the nervous?
Oh yeah. A hometown team. I mean, I was a Broncos fan. I was an Avalanche. I am an Avalanche fan right now. But I grew to love those things after moving here and being 20 or 30 years old before I got involved. Well, with the Vikings, I mean, they've been in my soul since I was 3 years old.
Right.
And I was just a giant over-the-top Viking fan when I was 4, doing stuff with football cards and I've always loved the Vikings, and what I was getting at is I love doing it, but the one part of the stadium experience for me that I don't like is just because of the way my booth is constructed and the way the speakers are and the way the stadium is. Believe it or not, I have a hard time hearing the crowd oftentimes.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
And it has nothing to do with the crowd not being loud enough. I know they're loud, and there are times, obviously, yes, I can hear them. But with all the stuff that's going on, first of all, in my head and stuff I have to pay attention to, and listening to my spotter and listening to my director and watching the play and reading and getting all the stuff out there, I sometimes, want to hear, are the fans saying first down when I say first down? And lots of times I can't hear it. I'm told by my wife and others that yes, they do.
Yeah, they do.
I can see arms. I can see arms doing it. So that makes me feel good. I look down and I see people, making the first down signal. So it's really cool to be doing what I'm doing for the team that I love.
So take us a step. When you're doing the public, announcing at the games, I've got to imagine a lot of people think you're up there, you're kind of going off a whim, and you're just kind of watching the game, and you're speaking out of what's happened. But I've got to imagine that there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, that you've got somewhat of a structured skit, for lack of a better word, that you're using throughout a game with a producer, and so I oftentimes wonder, are you really enjoying the game? Does it really feel like you can watch all of it? Because I'm assuming you've got a lot of things that you're responsible for when you're the PA at a game, so kind of take us through that a little bit. How complicated is that? How much stuff is really going on behind the scenes that no one really knows other than us sitting in the stand just listening to, a great voice and the play-by-play? But I got to imagine there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, right?
It depends on the team you're talking about and the show.
Okay.
The show that a team puts on. And I'll tell you right off the top, the difference between the Denver Broncos show and the difference between the Minnesota Vikings show is night and day. Obviously, I'm going to say the Vikings show is much, much, much better. I'll also say that the Broncos show is great. But the difference is the Broncos, in between timeouts or during timeouts, during the game, in stadium, the Broncos would have me read 3 or 4 different features or ads during every timeout, plus they'd maybe play a video. So I was constantly reading ads, whether it's go buy a Coca-Cola, go buy a car, go get a mortgage. Hey, be sure you join the Broncos at FanFest. Hey, be sure you do all this. Just berating the fans with stuff during the timeouts.
Okay.
When I came to the Vikings, I was just amazed at how relaxed and awesome the atmosphere is, because I don't do any of that. I bet at Broncos games I read 75 paragraphs during a game. At the Vikings, I maybe read 2. It's amazing the difference.
That is amazing. I would never think that. But
with the Broncos, yes, there's a ton of stuff going on in my head all the time, meaning wearing a headset and hearing all the talk of, okay, coming up in this next break, we got this, and this. Okay, now camera 2, I'm going to need a shot of this. Okay, and when we go over here, now remember that check presentation thing, those people are going to be down there. And that's all going on while I'm watching the game and trying to say, gain of 6, second down and 4. And it got to a point where I actually gave my headset to my spotter, and I made my spotter be the guy that was in contact with the director, because I couldn't have all that noise in my head because the show was so busy with so many things going on. Now, with the Vikings, I don't wear a headset. I sit right next to the director, but there's, it's so relaxed, yet so entertaining, and so much of the Vikings stuff is very well-produced videos, and most of them are about the team and about the players. It's not about trying to sell something.
Right.
Good point.
So I got to get this question out there and make sure that I get it in before we run out of time. Take us through the Minneapolis Miracle, the Stephon Diggs catch against the Saints in the divisional, and what was going on up there, what was going on in your head, what was going on. And I know that you don't necessarily, Paul Allen does the play-by-play on the radio, but you have to call things as they're happening. But just take us through that moment and kind of what happened with that catch and with everything that was going on with that game and that catch.
Man, how I wish that we were talking about that play after the Vikings had won Super Bowl 52, huh?
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. I know it. I know.
Because that play, it loses a lot of its luster. I think, it was still great, and it was an incredible atmosphere and one of the coolest things, I've ever been a part of. But it's tarnished by not winning Super Bowl 52. But the play is how did it go? New Orleans kicked a field goal to go ahead. Was that right?
Yep. New Orleans kicked the field goal to go ahead, and there were 25 seconds left on the clock, and then we were at third down at our 39 with 10 seconds to go, and that kind of sets up the scenario with Diggs. Yeah.
So it was after they kicked the field goal. I have kind of two bosses that sit in the room with me, and they'll remain nameless, and they're not guilty, but basically they both checked out. When New Orleans kicked that field goal, that was like, are you kidding me?
Okay.
Are you kidding me? After everything that we have done and those guys in building towards, and then there was the whole looming Super Bowl thing. Those guys had worked on being part of the Vikings and the stadium and then the Super Bowl for years and years and years and years, and they were just seeing it end in front of them. One of them, I think, actually even kind of left the room, and the other one, like I said, just kind of checked out. And then they would poke their heads up to see what happened in the first two passes or whatever it was that they got towards midfield, incomplete passes, I don't know. And I'm just, saying whatever I have to say. Keenum's pass intended for Diggs is incomplete, second down and 10. And then it happens. And it was bedlam in the booth that I'm in, and there's 6 people in there, the guys that run the down and distance on the board, the 2 bosses that I talked about, the DJ is in there, my spotter's in there. And then it was bedlam. It was jumping up and down, high-fiving everybody, but yet I sat firmly in my chair with my eyes focused straight ahead. I was cheering a lot inside, but you could have never been able to tell by looking at me. And I kept waiting for some sort of signal, some sort of something of what we were going to do from the referees. Now, when the Vikings score a touchdown, I don't actually announce it right away. The way the Vikings do it is when the Vikings score a touchdown, they immediately play Prince, Let's Go Crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's not until after that Prince song is over and they're getting ready to line up for the extra point that I say anything. Okay. So that's what I'm focused on is we have to kick an extra point. I knew the rule. It was a regulation. You have to kick the extra point. But yeah, all the players had left the field, and so I'm just sitting there while everybody's going crazy around me, watching the referees. And finally I see the referees, heading towards the locker room to tell the players to come back out. And so I really didn't say anything until I said, whoever lining up for the extra point.
Well, that's a true professional. In the midst of all the pandemonium going on, you have to stay calm and keep focused on the job, and that's interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did not, I'm sure I, maybe smiled at one or two of the guys and maybe turned around in my chair and gave them a high five, but otherwise, yeah, I was just totally focused on the referees and what I needed to do. But it was an amazing moment, and it happened right in front of me. The sideline, 30-yard line right there, that's right straight up from there is where my chair is. It was it was amazing. And I told people all the time that Viking fans are used to endings of games like that. Not necessarily with a pass or whatever, whether it's a penalty or a fumble or a turnover or an unbelievable play, whatever it is. Vikings fans are used to having games end like that.
We are.
But every time we see them end like that, we lose.
Yeah, right. We're on the receiving end
There's
of the
only
good stuff.
one possible thing that could happen here that you're going to lose. Only one possible thing in the entire world, and somehow it happens.
For sure.
We've seen that
We have.
many, many times.
We have seen that.
And we lose. This time, we won.
We did.
And the coolest part of that for me then was after we got the extra point kicked and the game is over, the atmosphere around the stadium. I left, I would guess, 30 minutes, maybe even 40 minutes after the final gun, and there were still thousands of people in the seats singing Purple Rain.
Right.
It's amazing.
And it was snowing that night, too. I remember
Yeah,
that.
it was.
That was an unbelievable night. Take us through for a couple minutes just in the day in the life of a game day. So let's just say game day is at noon on a Sunday, typical Sunday noon game. When do you get to the stadium? Do you have routines? Do you do rehearsal, mic check and things like that? Or kind of what are some of the rituals or the things that you do on a game day to get ready for a noon kickoff?
Yes to all of those things. My duties in that are pretty limited, and there's not really that much preparation that I need to do. The most preparation that I do is making my rosters, or my boards as I call them, and it's just a piece of paper that I tape to the table, and I break up the opponent, well, both Vikings and their opponent. I have the offense numbers and names of offensive players on one page and numbers and names of defensive players on the other page, and that's how I call the numbers. I don't memorize the numbers of the other team. Certainly, most of the Viking numbers I know. So that's kind of my really only physical preparation, is making those sheets every week and taping them on the table. There's a production meeting. Let's see, games are at noon, so the production meeting's like at 7:30 every morning. And since have flown in and am sitting in a hotel, there's no reason for me not to go to the production meeting. Although I don't get a ton out of the production meeting because of what I talked about before. The Vikings have so little for me to do in between timeouts and things during the game. So what I get out of the production meeting is, this is who the national anthem is. This is how we're announcing the national anthem. Sometimes we have a rehearsal of the national anthem. I find out who's blowing the Yaller horn, all of those things. So It's important that I go to that meeting or get that information, but, I could also get that information on a piece of paper. So I go to the meeting, and then after the meeting, I really don't have much to do for the next 3 hours. Lots of times I go outside and walk around the stadium and just watch fans and see stuff. Of course, I got to do my cut and paste session with my rosters and put them on the table, and sometimes I make them fancier than others.
Right.
But otherwise, I'm just kind of fired up and waiting for the game to get underway.
Yeah, the blowing the Yaller horn. I mean, that there isn't many things that get the fans going other like that. I mean, just when you come on and you just say, and now to sound the Yaller horn, please welcome, whoever it is. I mean, it's awesome to have you hear that. And then, I mean, it just gets, it's at the kind of the peak of the moment in the pregame, I feel like. And our seats that we have in the stadium are, on the same, fairly close to the Yaller horn. So we have a pretty good view of it. And it's just that pregame piece and hearing you come on and things like that, there's nothing better that gets people fired up for the start of the game than that.
Well, and that goes to, my boss, Brian Harper, who's been with the Vikings, man. I'm not even going to say, but it's in the teens of years. Mm-hmm. And his vision of what an atmosphere should be like for Minnesota Vikings fans to enjoy games gets high marks from everyone that matters. The NFL has representatives at every single game, and they make reports after every single game about things you did right and things you did wrong, and violations of league policy, and whatever it might be.
Wow.
Surrounding the entire stadium experience. Whether it's lines on concourses, or words that the public address or announcer says, or music that you play, or how you go about doing all those things, you get reported or graded on every game. And the Minnesota Vikings stadium experience, I think, has been either number one or number two for years and years. And it's because of the people from Minnesota. It's not because of what we do. It's the fact that everybody loves what we do.
Yeah, it's definitely a great program. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, no, it's great. So as we kind of we'll be respectful of your time here too, and just got just a few minutes left we're with Alan Roach tonight, the public address announcer of the Minnesota Vikings, also Colorado Avalanche, among other things, and voice of the Super Bowl. Let's talk for just 1 minute about the Super Bowl before we get into our last topic. As we saw here, when the Super Bowl was here, a lot of things were, the NFL seems to kind of come in and take over, and not that that's a bad thing, but they kind of take over the show and do their thing, and they have all the things with the stadium going on, and I'm sure the personnel and different things like that going on. I'm guessing that's similar for you when it comes to the Super Bowl that you are the announcer for. So do they, they probably have things fairly well scripted out for you and ready for you to go, or how does that Super Bowl process work?
It's really not that much different than what I do at the Vikings, or at the Avalanche for that matter. Again, I mean, I'm a upfront, quote unquote, visible, person in the presentation of the game. But what I do, so much of what I do is just reading a piece of paper. Somebody else has to write the scripts, and somebody else has to use the right words in the scripts and all that stuff. And they've been, gone over and edited and re-edited 15 times before they make it to a book that someone hands to me that says, here you go, here's your game script. And so my job's easy. I mean, all I got to do is read it. And yeah, we go through rehearsals and, the days before the Super Bowl and stuff like that. I work with, the entire game presentation crew. And we've worked together for many years now, doing games, Super Bowls and Pro Bowls and NFL International in London and all that. It's always the same group. And those guys are just the best at what they do in the world. And so, again, my job's easy. I walk in, sit down, read, talk about the game, go home.
Let everyone do the hard work, and then you come in and steal the limelight, huh?
Yeah, when I go to the Super Bowl, I mean, I get to the Super Bowl the day after the Pro Bowl, because we have an event always, Super Bowl opening night. And then for the next 4 days, the Tuesday, the Wednesday, the Thursday, I don't do anything. There's nothing for me to do. I mean, I could go over to the stadium, I guess, and read over my national anthem announcing script. I could read it 165 times a day, I suppose. But otherwise, there's really no preparation. And so it's not until rehearsals on Friday that I really get into practicing, and then comes game time, and again, it's just reading.
Awesome. Well, I know, Jeremy, you wanted to touch on a couple things that Alan and you and I had talked about beforehand, and that's kind of some of the things he's got on his plate here real soon.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. It sounds like you're going to be taking the next few weeks here to do the public announcing for some of the baseball games, Major League Baseball games, kind of more of the neutral site type of thing. And then also it sounds like you're going over to London as well to do some of the PA announcing for some of those games. So kind of take us through that process. How did it come about that you got into that role, and how does that type of public announcing maybe a little bit differ from a football game?
Well, the way it happened is Major League Baseball has seen what productions are like in the National Football League, and so they hired the company that basically is in charge of those productions, and it's Van Wagner Sports and Entertainment, and Bob Becker is one of the heads of that, Bob and Paul. And I've worked with Bob for 14, 15 years now doing all the NFL type of things. And so when Major League Baseball had some huge games they wanted to present in, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a home team atmosphere.
Neutral.
More of a neutral site. More of a neutral.
A neutral site. There you go. So they have these big neutral site games, and there are no neutral site games in baseball.
Right.
I mean, they don't exist, in the World Series and all that stuff. So for these neutral site games, they hired Van Wagner, and I was lucky enough to be able to tag along and do these games. I think Major League Baseball started the games in Omaha before the College World Series. I think this might be the third year of them doing it. It's certainly not the first year, I know that. But it's the first year for me. And next week, actually, I fly to Omaha, and on Thursday night of next week, the Royals and Tigers play in the stadium that used to be Rosenblatt. I don't know is the name of it now. Still Rosenblatt, the new Rosenblatt.
Might be.
But anyway, Major League Baseball plays a game there before the College World Series. And then this year, for the first time ever, there's going to be games in London during the regular season, and it's the Yankees and the Red Sox. They play June 29th and June 30th in London in the Olympic Stadium that they built for the Summer Olympics 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was. And then the final game is in Williamsport, right before the Little League World Series, but that game will conflict with one of the Viking preseason games, and so I won't be able to announce that game for MLB. I'll be in U.S. Bank Stadium that day. But so I'm really looking forward to the trip to Omaha, which sounds funny. And London, I get to go to London with the NFL for NFL international games every year, so it's not a giant treat anymore to go to London. I've been about 15 times, but it will be an incredible treat to go and do baseball.
That sounds like a lot of fun. No, absolutely. So, our time has flown by with you, and I want to be respectful of your time too. And so, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your night to join us here live on our SkolCast, and people have definitely been watching, and they'll definitely watch it back. And so what we'll do is when we get back into the Viking season here, you said that you sometimes just take a little breather before the games start and walk around the concourse or something. So maybe before a game we'll tweet out to you or something, and maybe we'll see if we can shake hands before a game or something like that and meet you in person.
Yeah, I have time, and I would enjoy that. And once we get closer to August, you can call me some night like this, and we'll talk about the depth chart and the X's and O's.
We'll definitely.
That sounds great.
We will definitely do that. We'll definitely going to put that on our calendar, and we know how to get a hold of you. And once we start getting into once training camp starts shaping up and some things are looking X's and O's wise, we'll reach back out to you, Alan. And again, appreciate the conversation. It's been great, and have a great night, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Yes, have a good rest of the summer and next few weeks with Major League Baseball.
I thank you for the outlet to allow my, nonstop rambling about myself to go on. My wife and kids don't allow me to do it around home, so it's nice to have somebody to do that too.
You can ramble anytime with us. That's fine.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Alan.
All right,
Alan,
guys.
talk to you
Good night.
soon.
Thanks. Have a good
Bye-bye.
night.